AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Our host brings you the leading minds in AI, sharing their story, their success, and their advice. Focusing on fast-tracking you to the top, AI in Action cuts through the hype to help you kickstart your data science career. To listen to the latest AI in Action podcast, head over to www.alldus.com/podcast or subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Podcasts.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of the Alldus podcast. I'm your host, Ben Sparks, and today we're continuing with our ServiceNow series. Today we're lucky to host Rich Jones. Rich is an IT service management leader with over 20 years experience. Rich has held numerous roles since he started his career as a customer service supervisor and has worked his way through the ranks holding positions including Director of Customer Service, Application Support Manager, Director of IT Change Management, and Director of Service Delivery. He worked at Multiplan for 14 years, was part of the initial implementation of ServiceNow at Zealous Healthcare, and currently holds the position of Director of IT Service Management for the Madison Square Garden. So he's definitely good for a good few Knicks tickets when the world opens up again. Today, Rich has kindly offered to walk us through his career, some of the learns he's gathered along the way, and give us an overview of what makes a successful implementation possible. He is going to be touching on a range of topics, including building and maintaining standards, building up from a strong foundation, alignment and valuation, and also the art of storytelling. So, Rich, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ben. Really happy to be here.
So, Rich, let's start by giving our listeners an overview of your career today and, some of the highlights. I think it's fair to say you've grown through the ranks, and I'm always interested in how people sort of get involved with ServiceNow. Everyone seems to have a different story, so love to hear about yours.
What I can definitely say is if there was an award in high school for least likely to be on an AI podcast or a ServiceNow podcast in high school, I was probably the guy going to win that. I have a degree in English. I'm terrible at math. My house, I'm the one helping the kids read Lord of the Flies. My wife is the one doing all the math stuff that goes on with high school and middle school math. I really backed into IT and into service management. As you mentioned, I was working in healthcare. I was in customer service. The folks that, how much deductible is left when you call in people, I was the guy getting yelled at, on those things. But I always loved technology. And really what my doorway into IT was working through some phone system implementations. Really, that was kind of the intersection of IT and customer service. Made a lot of friends on the IT side and kind of worked my way into IT and transitioned into that space there. And then really, I was blessed in my career to have leaders that kind of saw my ability to kind of bring order to chaos, kind of as a process engineer to build teams. And they kind of moved me around to different areas where they felt that was needed. So really, my experience then started getting into IT as a business analyst, then shifted into building application support teams, did some work in business intelligence and analytics, project management, and then ultimately into service management and ServiceNow. Really, I think I've written my own job description more times than I've been handed one. So I've really been blessed in that way that I've kind of been able to write my own path to a certain extent, through that transition into the IT world.
It's interesting. I was talking to someone the other day about making yourself valuable, and it really seems like you've done that in each of your roles and allowed you to kind of craft your own destiny. So let's talk about your current role. I'm sure our listeners would love to hear some of the cool projects you're involved with and a bit about your current responsibilities.
Oh, definitely. Lot of exciting things going on. We've been working with so many different teams, from our people practices to our security teams, our finance and procurement teams. I joined Madison Square Garden about a year and a half ago now. And going into February of this year, we completely reset our ServiceNow instance. We shook the Etch-a-Sketch and started all over again. And we've been working furiously to kind of digitize really the entire process around how, MSG employees and associates basically interact with IT. The culture of the company really was one of, old school shoulder tap. And I got to give a lot of credit to leadership they saw where the company was going, where the company needed to go, and they knew that that had to change. There's a tremendous amount of growth that's going to go on, and they wanted to prepare for that. So they brought in really a team of people to do that. And really, since I've been there, we've implemented a new service desk with, chat functionality and kind of using ServiceNow. We have a new IT service portal with probably now over 60 request workflows for things as complex as onboarding a new employee and all the different workflows and subroutines that go into getting someone in place to walk in that first day and do their job. To as simple as, I need Microsoft Visio, licensed and installed. We've implemented Discovery, which is the agentless kind of scanning protocol in ServiceNow that basically sweeps your network. It finds all the different pieces of technology that are out there, classifies it, brings it back into the database. It basically figures out any relationships between those components and kind of puts it all together in a really solid piece of software to kind of be able to see that and operate that way. We just recently implemented security operations, which I'm sure, listeners and everyone have been reading the news, and that was very timely. So now we have the capability of aggregating, data from several of our different kind of security threads that are coming in. And we've got a lot of automated workflows built on top of that. So our security analysts can kind of cut through the noise and the chaff and get to the actual threats as quickly as possible and then kind of take action against those things. We're starting to build integrations in several other areas like Azure, Splunk, monitoring solutions, purchasing solutions. So there's just a tremendous amount going on, and it's a lot. It's a little overwhelming, but my team and I, we're learning and growing, and we're just touching so many different parts of the company, and also so many different capabilities that ServiceNow brings to the table. So it's been a really exciting year and a half with a lot more to come.
Wow, that definitely sounds exciting. I can imagine with all that lot going on, you sometimes need to step back and take a breath to recalibrate yourself. That's an awful lot of stuff. We've spoke about this before. It's fair to say that Madison Square Garden, the business, have probably felt firsthand some of the challenges that 2020 has brought, just given the nature of the business. I was really inspired by your story about how you guys have practically looked at the situation to improve ITSM, and you've obviously touched on a bit of it there, but it would be great to know a little bit more of a high level, at least the parts you can share anyway on where that's kind of taken you.
Yeah, I kind of tongue in cheek will say that I picked a really bad time to get out of healthcare and get into the business of putting lots of people in really small spaces.
Yeah.
But all that being said, the pandemic really, it's kind of challenged everyone. I don't think there's an area of life or a company that hasn't been impacted. Even if, in some way it was good for you, it's probably really accelerated how everyone works in some places, and it's really changed the way people work in others. And really no one saw it coming. No one was prepared. I think a lot of businesses are looking at this as, hey, we need to accelerate our digital transformation. We need to accelerate our automation things that we can do. Obviously, a lot of companies, downturn in finances and layoffs, so they're trying to do more with less. At MSG, our IT schedule revolves around a very dynamic venue schedule. So we do our work, and in the corporate world, a lot of things are done on the weekend. For us, it's the opposite, right? We have to map our time to do work where we're bringing systems down around Knicks and Rangers games, the Christmas Spectacular in Radio City, Billy Joel in the arena. These are all things that, we can't do the usual middle of the night. We can't start a deployment on Sunday if Billy Joel is finishing up in the arena, Saturday night. So with COVID, everything went dark, right? Everything was shut down. So we kind of started really knowing what we had to do from a transform perspective. We've condensed about 2+ years of technology uplift probably into the last several months. The amount of work that we've done is just, it's staggering. And now we're really shifting into that mindset of getting ready to reopen, with things that are going on that we see is, how do we start getting ready to have people coming back into our venues? And we got to make sure that everything works, right? So, some of the preseason games that are happening for the Knicks and eventually the NHL, I think, is getting ready to start, and the streaming shows that have been done in some of the venues. These are just basically shakedown cruises for a new ship. Like we're kind of shaking out a lot of technology, making sure things are working, monitoring all of that stuff. And really with COVID now, you're looking at, how does that change the nature of a venue going forward, right? So you're looking at frictionless entry methods, right? Ticketmaster has been in the news talking about things with, your COVID testing results or antibody results being linked to your event ticket. So as you can kind of come in and possibly get your identity, we can link that to your medical history and know that you're safe to come into the venue or need screening or anything like that. If you think a little bit about the way Clear and kind of the TSA works in airports, that's the kind of concept here I think you're going to start to see for large scale events, right? That you'll have a function like that, whether it's some kind of identity scan linked back to your history that you've authorized to look at other bits like your medical history or things like that. For MSG on the horizon, probably the biggest exciting thing that we have coming, non-COVID related is Sphere, which is kind of our next gen venue that's being built in Vegas. The scale of this thing is mind blowing. We're talking next generation everything. It's basically VR without the goggles. You've got a screen, I think, that is about 4 football fields pushing 16K content. Because 4K and 8K is so yesterday, we're going straight to 16K. You've got beamforming sound. There's no bad seat in the house from an audio perspective. Full environmental integration because it's really designed to engage all full sensory experience, right? It's going to hit you at temperature, hit you at moisture, hit you at sound, hit you at sight. It's going to really make you feel like you're wherever it is that they're bringing to you in the venue itself. And on top of that, quite literally, the outside of this building, which is the largest man-made spherical structure in the world, is covered in LEDs. So the whole sphere is a big screen. So from the outside, they can display content that's happening inside. They can do all kinds of crazy things with what they're going to do with that. It's just the technology involved in supporting that's kind of underway now is just, it's all next level. It's just completely next level. And that goes back to some of the digital transformation that MSG recognized it needs to go through, because to be able to build that structure and support that structure, the technology has to be, second to none really in a lot of things we're doing. And on top of Vegas, we're also building one or getting ready to build one in London, and there'll be more to follow kind of around the world. So there's a lot going on with that. And, you look at 2020 as an insane year for a lot that's gone on. Obviously, we've all kind of gone through a lot this year. It's kind of incredible that MSG has kind of kept going, kept us driving some of the technology transformations we're doing, that wasn't shut down along with the venues, but they knew that they could take the time to get that done. And as we see, vaccinations happening, and hopefully we're going to get back to normal and kind of move on from this pretty soon. And really, I think MSG is hoping and preparing to be ready to welcome our guests back when everything comes back to normal.
And it's truly inspiring that forward push, even through sort of the challenges that we've had this year. And I must admit, I am super excited about pretty much everything you've just mentioned there, especially the Sphere. It sounds awesome. So let's take a dive into sort of ITSM and specifically ServiceNow. You're on implementation number 3. Could you give our listeners a quick overview of why ITSM is so important into the organization?
Certainly. ITSM, IT service management, is really the idea that your IT team, your technology group, is a service provider to business. A lot of people, it's an expense, it's this, it's that, but really it's a service provider. We in IT supply capabilities and services that the business needs to go get the work done, to go earn the money, right? To go do what they need to do. So whether that's, ordering a new laptop or having a phone system that, supports your people suddenly shifting to work remotely or from home, or email, all these collaborative technologies that, suddenly became so critical in 2020, right? These are basically the things that the IT team has to supply, the business with. And it's all about aligning what IT is doing with what the business needs, right? Again, this year was a great example. We at MSG were already trying to get things, what we call above venue and into the cloud and not tied to a specific building. And when we had to shift people to home, we were able to do that, right? Because we had that capability and those were services we were able to do. But that's kind of what the service management piece is. It's really aligning with what the business needs, building services that fit those needs and the purpose of what the business is trying to do, and then really constantly measuring those services, right? How are they performing? Is there improvement needed? What's working as designed? What maybe the design is drifting and we need to adjust to that drift? Or what business is doing is drifting and we need to adjust to that drift? When something breaks, how fast can we restore that service, right? What's the tolerance of business to have that service down? Maybe there's no tolerance, or maybe they can wait a little bit of time for something to be back up because they don't need that till the end of the week or whatever. So what is that disruption factor and how do we get around that? And one of the critical things is, how do we stop it from happening again? A lot of times it's something breaks, you fix it, we all pat ourselves on the shoulder and move on. But ITSM kind of challenges you a little bit to say, hey, how do we stop that from reoccurring, right? The same type of problem shouldn't be reoccurring over and over again. And ITSM is really, it's a set of practices, it's a framework that kind of gets into how do you IT, right? It kind of puts some common ideas, some common language around what IT needs to do so that people can kind of speak about the same thing, speak the same ways, and it kind of gives you that run book for how you handle the different things that IT does.
Awesome. And when we talk about ServiceNow specifically as a product, how does that fit into the picture?
Well, ServiceNow really, it's a cloud-based, software as a service solution, but it really started as an ITSM solution. The original core of ServiceNow, still in place today, is really called ITSM. And that's probably where most of their customers started using their product, really. And that is, as an ITSM solution, it's basically has all the forms and workflows for tracking the various ITSM processes, whether you're talking incident management or change management or request management or any of the other core parts that make up ITSM. But really, ServiceNow has also kind of evolved over the years. And it's really kind of, and even the way they brand themselves a little bit, is a workflow company. They're a digital transformation, a digital workflow company. And what they really built when they built their product is a really flexible, code-light, codeless kind of framework tool that has a very powerful, business rules workflow engine in it. They've added a very capable integration suite and platform. And, at the end of the day, you have basically the engine that can run IT. It's not going to do everything IT needs to do, but it becomes that core foundation of what IT runs on and how all the work is going on. So ServiceNow is really letting you track, report on, analyze, automate the work moving through IT. And even now they're starting to move into HR and customer service and facilities management, because really it's just workflow and work tracking. And that's what the tool lets you do. And it really lets you kind of build it, around those best practices, but lets you kind of, solution it how you need to. You guys had a great episode a little while ago. I think it was 155, a really good introduction to ServiceNow and what it is. That was a good podcast for anyone that wants to learn a little bit more about ServiceNow. I think there was a lot of good conversation in that episode.
Thank you. I remember that one very well. Awesome. So look, when we first met, we spoke about industry standards, as, in the framework of ServiceNow, and looking at sort of what people should have front of mind. When you're sort of talking to your stakeholders, what are some of the key messages that you're kind of delivering to them? I'm thinking probably people you're talking to in the business side.
Yeah. And that's a tough one, right? Especially because a lot of people want things to work the way they want it to work. But you've really got to, stick to building and maintaining a certain set of standards, particularly if you're looking for automation, and depending on scalability, you can't, every new ticket that gets opened can't be handled in its own way. And with ServiceNow, you want to stay really as close to its baseline, its out of box ServiceNow as possible. It's a tremendously flexible tool, kind of all that code light and codeless development that you can do. But it makes it very tempting to start to bend ServiceNow around your workflow or your ideas. And I think the problem there is you got to look at something like ServiceNow that has a massive client base, is designed around, industry standards, they're not foolish. They learn from their customers. They see what's working and what's not working in the various instances that are out there and the kind of customizations that people are building on the platform that are successful and not. So they've really kind of kept their product updated so that it's staying with those industry standards. And to start to really go heavily away from that, you're not just going away from the way ServiceNow is designed, but you're starting to go away from a lot of standard methodology and things that are in place. So you want to kind of stay in line with that. You want to, if anything, bend your processes around ServiceNow a little bit, or around kind of your defined process, whether you're using an ITIL or an ITSM type framework. What I kind of always say is configuration of the tool is good, customizing the tool is bad. We want to tailor it to our purpose, but we're not cutting straight from cloth here. We're not, this is not a custom tailored suit. This is kind of off the rack, and we're nipping and tucking it to fit, what we need it to fit.
Lovely, excellent. And then obviously, I'm sure there are tons of different sort of opinions out there on that topic. And I think it's really sort of good to hear that you're probably trusting in the work that's been done on the back end and bringing that into your business. So kind of brings us on to our next point, really. I know that, building a strong foundation is the key to success in pretty much any business or anything we do. Can you sort of talk to me about that, about when you're sort of looking at ITSM solutions and again, specifically in ServiceNow?
Yeah, and my kind of entry into this was always looking at the CMDB, and that was kind of the how I got into ITSM and really how I landed in this. And the CMDB is the configuration management database, right? It's an ITIL or ITSM concept. And ServiceNow kind of at its core started off growing out of that CMDB. And the CMDB is basically that database that stores information about all of your assets and their relationships to each other, right? So traditionally that is your servers, your desktops, your printers, but it can also be processes and workflows and teams and groups and people that support a service or people that consume a service and things like that. And really, to me, what that came into is if you've been in IT long enough, you probably started off with spreadsheets of inventory and Visio diagrams of things. And, you're only going to get so far doing that before you need, a better type of solution. And the CMDB is kind of that. And I think that's the foundation of any strong ServiceNow platform or any strong ITSM platform is really having all of those assets, because, you can have it just as a ticketing system, but really the magic starts to happen when you have that CMDB and the value starts to come out of things like, let's say I have to do a workflow for a change request or for a service request where I need to either deploy new code or I need someone to get access to something, right? A piece of software or whatever. Well, who approves that request, right? Who implements the change or who provisions the access? Who then supports that system, once the access is granted or the change is made? So the CMDB lets me start to, establish those attributes for a specific system or a tool or a piece of software. And then the workflow engine can basically look at the workflow we're in, whether it's change or request. It can understand the solution that's being touched or the IT service that's being touched. And then it can pull in those attributes to make decisions about who it's routing work to, right? Who am I sending an approval request to? Who am I sending a task to go provision access or to go deploy code? So it can kind of put all of that together into the workflow engine so that I don't have to build a distinct workflow for every single asset in my infrastructure. I can kind of build a more modulating type of workflow that says, hey, go look at the asset being touched, grab these attributes, send approval here, send implementation there, send support requests there. And the CMDB can kind of drive all of that. Not only that, but we know if built right, we kind of organize things into services so that if you look at something like email or messaging, right, as a service, business thinks of it that way. I need to get in touch with people. I need to talk to people. Well, in IT, we know that might be comprised of, all of our email platform, our texting platform, our mobile technologies, or possibly our collaboration tools, our Slack, our Teams, or things like that. Well, the CMDB can kind of draw relationships together based on that sort of service. And then it can also kind of show us who's consuming the service. So if Slack goes down, we can contact the business folks who use Slack. We can direct them to workarounds or provide them with knowledge on how they can either reset Slack or get to it through another way, or keep them just informed about how long the recovery is going, what we see is happening, and how soon we think we're going to be back up on that platform for them. And it's a lot more precise than just blasting a generic email to the entire company that Slack is down when, vast portions of your company might not care and might not use it. And then they stop paying attention to those messages because it never really pertains to them. So the CMDB also drives flows in that direction, for the AI audience out there, CMDB it's really data, right? It's data that your machine learning, your AI platforms can kind of leverage, automate responses. Hey, every time I see a ticket like this for this item in the CMDB, it always goes to that team. So once I have a certain confidence level, 85, 90%, I know when I see these keywords mentioned in a ticket, it's going to go to that support team. So you can start to leverage that data to make those decisions about how to automate or use machine learning to kind of, get tickets to the right hands for resolution as quickly as possible. So those are just, that to me is that foundation that once you lay it, you can really start building out a lot of really cool stuff on top of it. But, like any structure, you've got to get the base of it right before you start building up and out.
We spoke a bit, again, when we first met, we were talking about innovation in the ISTM space. What do you feel is most important for a company to evaluate as they're embarking on innovation in either platform or ITSM in general?
Yeah, that kind of comes down to alignment, with where you're going and what you want to do and kind of the value you're trying to bring. I think a lot of us in the technology space, we see some really cool things we can do with technology, and we want to drive in that direction, right? We want to play with the newest and coolest technology and the newest and coolest tools. And sometimes that's not necessary. Sometimes business isn't ready for that, or sometimes it's not, fit for purpose is kind of the phrase, right? It's not going to deliver the value. An example would be, right, recently I've been looking at a lot of the AI and virtual assistants in the market, right? We see these things all over the place in our consumer lives, right? They live on our cell phones. They turn the lights on in our house. They can do all kinds of wonderful things for us. But on the service management side of things, like, how does that work? And it's a great example because we're looking at newish technology. We're looking at a shift from kind of digital input to analog input, if you will, when we go into that space, because today when we're designing request forms, right, we want it digital. We don't want open text fields, right? We want that person not just to give us a number about how much they plan on spending in a year with a vendor that we're evaluating. We want them to select one of a few very specific ranges that will define the workflow and how it goes forward, right? Above this dollar amount, it has to get VP approval. Even higher, it's SVP approval or whatever the flow is. But we don't want them to just type in a number. We want them to pick a value. When you start getting to natural language inputs and things like talking to the Siris, the Alexas, the Google Assistants, or whatever type of bot you want to put out there as an interface, now we start getting, analog input. We start getting language that's coming in. And for AI, to understand the English language is great, but it's also got to understand the technical terminology. It's got to understand the terminology of my company. At a place like MSG, we're talking venue technology, terminology. So, how easily can we add to that lexicon of language, right? How well does the system learn from its data and taking that input, right? How much handholding is that needed? How much data is really required to start making confident decisions about where to direct someone to something? If I need tens of hundreds of thousands of tickets in that data flow to really get that confidence level, and I'm not generating that many tickets, that's not going to work for me. If you give me an AI that can speak 100 languages, but it doesn't get the nuance of my business, it's not going to work, right? For us, what time is Post Malone, right? It's got to understand who Post Malone is and why you're asking what time he is, right? He's not a time, but his show is going to start at a certain time in the evening, per se. That's something that's not fit for purpose. It might be a very, very capable tool, doesn't do what I need it to do. So you really have to understand that alignment and understand the value you're going for, because when you look at something like that, the beauty of the right tool, having that right alignment and having that right valuation is it lets us, in MSG, stay in that shoulder tap kind of culture I talked about earlier, where Instead, now it's like that AI bot that they're tapping on the shoulder through Teams or Slack or a support portal or on their phone. Or, you know, we have employees in the venue that are interacting through an iPad, and if they can just, hit the button and talk to it and say, hey, I need a mop on the concourse outside of gate 12, or, hey, my register's down, or, a lot of the Department of Health standards are there. So what do I need to do to open up the popcorn stand at, gate 43, if they can interact that way through that more natural way and get the instruction they need and get the tickets opened, and all of a sudden that someone's going to come with a mop and clean up that spill before someone slips and falls and gets hurt. That's a game changer that they're not trying to type in or interact. So I think, that type of technology, looking at your non-knowledge worker space, can be fantastic, but it's got to do all those other things I talked about. Otherwise, you end up with something that's not fit for purpose. You don't have that alignment with what the way the tool needs to be for the business, and you're not going to get the value out of it. You're going to end up with this really big implementation that probably costs a lot of money that isn't providing the value you need.
Looking at your career, as we mentioned before, that you've come through the ranks from the service desk side. We talk to a lot of people that are, moving into directorship, moving into management, are also kind of embarking on maybe even talking to senior technical and non-technical stakeholders in their business now. What sort of advice have you got, and what tips and tricks do you tend to share with your team who are probably embarking on that journey?
And it's something that when I heard people talk about this, I didn't quite take it as seriously, but I think as I've moved up, it's something I really kind of understand the value, which is you've really got to be able to tell the story. And maybe that's the English major in me that comes out, but you have to be able to communicate what you're doing up to that C-suite level, up to your decision makers. You've got to be able to distill the technical down to the non-technical. You've got to know the audience, and it's really critical to be able to evangelize the technology you're championing and be able to educate your C-suite, your executives, and even your customers on really what that value is, right? We talk just a lot about that, evaluation process. You have to be able to explain that. And I think when you're really good at doing that, or you've got people in the org that are good at doing that, it really helps in the budgeting cycles. It assists the decision makers in making the right decisions about what they're doing. It makes them better sponsors, of the technology, because it helps them to create or provide better requirements, right? They can better explain what they want a solution to do if they understand enough about the capabilities that are out there and what they can do. An example I would give to that is a little while ago, we had an executive that came to my team, and she had this very, very complex manual workflow involving these 4 separate forms. And, these people were constantly passing all these forms back together. So in preparation for talking to us about it, she kind of spent a lot of time condensing these 4 separate forms down to one form. And when we started looking at it, myself and my developer, we kind of were chuckling, but we're like, all right, well, we're going to take all the work you did, condensing it to one form, and we're going to break it back out into 4. But what we had to kind of explain to her was why we were doing that, was because while the information needed to be condensed into like a single entry point, the reality is they were 4 distinct workflows that would run independently. So we had to kind of split out the bits and pieces that workflow A cared about, that workflow B did not care about. And we had to show her the way the tool was going to do that. And we kind of luckily had some other examples of what we were thinking of that we could kind of show her and walk her through it. And the great thing is she got it. She understood. She was able to then say, okay, I know what you guys need, and step back and kind of rework some of the requirements with the understanding that she had, which gave us the ability to then really just run from what she was giving us. But it also had the effect that we now had a powerful ally, and she was able to kind of talk with her peers. And when we had meetings talking about this tool or the solution we were building, she did most of the speaking. So now you had business talking to business about the technical solution, and she was able to kind of explain why we were doing it a certain way. And we in technology got to sit back and be a little more of the color commentary about the whys and what we were doing. But that was key, because it would have been really confusing for her to watch us, rip apart something she just condensed down to one back into the four. So we really had to tell that story. We really had to show the way the technology was going to do ultimately what she needed it to do, but just in a different way than maybe she was envisioning, but we were still going to get to the same place. And once we kind of got her on board with that, it made the rest of the project so much more easy. And you had that champion out on the business side kind of, dealing with a lot of things that were going on. And it created a great partnership, and it really let us build something very, very complex, but we built something very quickly that was fit for purpose, and it met, the needs of everyone. So it's a key part of just being able to communicate or identify who can communicate and make sure those are the people in your org and your technology org that are doing that kind of evangelization and kind of selling the story of what you're doing and why you want to do it and how it aligns with what business needs. It's very powerful, and I think it's very important, and it's often overlooked. A lot of us in technology, it's really cool technology, and we don't need to say anything else other than that, but that's not true, right? Business needs to understand what value you're bringing to them. And I think you mentioned it earlier, and maybe it is a bit of my luck in my career. Having that way of defining your value kind of is key, right? Whether it's writing your own job description or presenting the type of solution you want to build for someone, I think that's a key skill. And as you move up into that director and above type of level, that becomes a very powerful tool in your toolbox.
Awesome. And I suppose the more you do it, the more confidence you get behind those practices as well. Awesome.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Rich, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for taking the time to come and chat to us today. It definitely seems like you guys have a ton going on. So is there anything you'd like to add before we go?
No, well, I mean, absolutely. I definitely appreciate the time to speak with you guys and speak with the audience. I think we're looking at a lot of convergence of kind of consumer and business technologies. You talk about the assistants on the phones and how that translates and some of that stuff. And, I think for the AI crowd, out there and thinking about that is, how that kind of integrates with workflow, right? How do some of the things maybe in the AI space that you're working on, natural language and, virtual assistants and stuff, how can you really hone that in and be a part of this convergence where we're bringing kind of the consumer grade capabilities that we see every day into that kind of corporate life and kind of accelerating the workflows in the corporate life. And really, after this year that we've all gone through, right, I think every company is foolish if they're not trying to figure out how to, manage these things better. And I think there's a lot of open space now for people to drive in that direction. So it's difficult times, but I think, very quickly we're going to shift into very exciting times.
Indeed, let's hope so. And you'll probably get a few calls from some of the AI folks looking for do some fact finding with you from that last comment. So I really hope they do. Rich, thank you very much. And look, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, hope everyone stays safe, and we're all back together as things come around, and everyone can get out to MSG's venues and have a good time again. Really looking forward to kicking that party off at the Sphere when that thing opens up and showing everyone what it can do. It's going to be really exciting.
I can't wait for a trip to Vegas for the Sphere, and obviously I'm looking forward to those Knicks tickets we mentioned. Thanks a lot, Rich.
Yeah. All right. Bye. Take care.
AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Alldus offer an exec search program. Alldus can help you discover how data science and AI can transform your company. With our unrivaled network of C-suite executives and senior AI professionals, we offer retained search services across the US and Europe. Get the Alldus advantage. Become a member of the Alldus community and enjoy some of the following: AI meetups. Once a month, our community gathers to listen to some of the leading experts in the world of data science and AI. Our speakers come from all over the world, including Dublin, Boston, and Frankfurt. We also have our AI mentors. Our experts will provide mentoring to Alldus members. And don't forget our AI in Action podcast. Each week we have guests from all over the world talking us through their education, career, and more. Become an Alldus member and get the Alldus advantage. For more information and to sign up for our newsletter, log on to www.alldus.com. That's www.alldus.com. Alldus International, empowering through AI.